Hello and welcome back to another episode of Ways of Agile. We have with us Vlad, of course,
Hi.
our regular co-host, and we have Razvan Sovrea with us, who actually I'm just going to pass it over to Razvan. Razvan, do you want to introduce yourself? Do you want to walk us through your path? Because it's been quite an extensive one. And just tell us what do you do now, and how did you start off in IT?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So, as Andre mentioned, my name is Razvan Sovrea. I'm currently working in the IT industry for 13 years. I started off in 2010 as a .NET developer. I stayed in that role for about 2 years, I believe, and then I transitioned to a business analysis role or business analyst, which again I played for about 2 or 3 years, I think. And I'm saying I think because at some point there was an intertwine between the business analyst role and the Scrum Master role, because that was the following the next transition that I did. And as a Scrum Master, I think it came as a natural transition at some point into a project management role. And obviously, now I am playing the project manager role at a company that is called Globant. We currently have offices across, I think, all continents. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
All right, thank you. There's one thing which I picked up, and I want to dive straight into that. I'm not sure it's a seamless transition from a Scrum Master to a project manager, and I'm wondering why you would view that, or if there's similarities that you want to showcase.
All right. So I think that the transition between a Scrum Master and the project manager as a seamless transition, as you pointed out. I think it's a kind of seamless transition when we are discussing about this role being played within a service provider company. So not a product company, but a service provider. And the reason why I'm saying this is that usually when you have a service provider company, you as Scrum Master, beyond what the Scrum Guide is saying, you are going to wake up with a bunch of responsibilities that in theory are outside of the scope of this role. And these extra responsibilities usually are are being carried out by project managers. That's why I kind of saw it as seamless transition.
Do before
Mhm.
you dive deeper, do you want to just come back to a service provider company? Because whenever we use any terms that may be a bit unknown for anyone non-IT,
Yeah.
we want to explain that a bit better. So, what exactly do you mean by that, by a service provider company?
Yeah, service solution provider. Let's just use these two terms meaning the same thing. Just
Yeah.
just to set the baseline for this. So basically, imagine that you have a you know maybe you have a company which does not necessarily have its core business as IT. Let's say Walmart, because it's is the largest corporation in the world, I think. So Walmart's, for instance, core business is definitely not IT. It's retail.
Yeah.
At the same time, we are in 2023, where any company that does not use digital solutions is kind of missing out. So there are companies whose, again, core business is not being IT, choose not to invest in their own IT departments because they do not have the knowledge, they do not have the background, they don't. Basically, they might not be able to know where to start from. So then they hire other companies, which are IT companies, who are going to implement the necessary solutions, digital solution, IT solutions, whatever we want to call them, for them. These are companies which have IT at their core, have extensive experience in developing solutions, have extensive experience with technology, have many individuals who are using most probably a plethora of technology, so they are able to find the best architecture, the best technical solution for a business need. These companies obviously are the ones which I'm calling service or solution providers.
Right. We, for our listeners, we also referred to them in a previous episode as an outsourcing company, just to put them all kind of in the same bracket.
Yeah, we definitely can use that terminology as well. But there's one thing I would like to point out here.
Yeah.
Outsourcing is not done only in IT. So, for instance, imagine that you need to transportation might be also outsourcing. I mean, Walmart, for instance, because I'm going with the Walmart example, might not have their own trucks, maybe. So they are outsourcing the logistics of getting goods from their main headquarters, or storages, to their shops with other people's trucks.
Yeah. So IT outsourcing, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I know we used this term previously, but we haven't actually explained it. So thank you, Razvan, for explaining it. So one question before coming back to the basics of getting into IT. One question is, can I take it that you're working in a Scrum framework still as a project manager, or how would you define your way of working?
As of now, right?
Yeah, right now.
Okay, as of now, my position as a project manager within an outsourcing project is kind of outside the scope of a certain methodology.
Right.
The teams which I'm overseeing, I will avoid the word coordinating because I'm not actually coordinating, I'm overseeing the teams. They are using Agile.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you said Scrum, I said Agile, and I purposely avoided the word Scrum because I think that Scrum in its essence has lost its popularity on one hand, and its best practices as described in the Scrum guide on the other hand. So I'm going to use Agile because it has those 12 principles kind of which are more important to abide by rather than the Scrum framework. Again, from my own experience, obviously.
This is actually a good topic that we may, most likely we will address and we will discuss into a lot more details, but without trying to dive too deep into it, just the one question I would have: are you still using the accountabilities in a Scrum framework?
The accountabilities in terms of roles?
Yeah, in terms of roles.
Again, the teams are using them.
So the teams,
within the actual, definitely, yeah.
So then I kind of wanted to have that image because I understand why you want to avoid the usage of the word Scrum, and we also mentioned this in a previous episode that there's actually a term for this, is Scrum But. So we're using Scrum, but we're not using that from Scrum, and we're not using that. So it's thank you. Vlad, do you have any questions?
Yeah, well, I wanted to go just back to basics. Now you pointed out that you're working in a service environment, and that has a seamless transition between a Scrum Master to a project management, which outside of that service environment might not seem maybe that seamless, basically within a product environment. Then can I ask, if anybody wants to kind of go into that direction and kind of that side of IT is what attracts them, is there any type of skill set or anything unique that they need to bring to the table in order to basically get into that side of IT and flourish?
The solution provider / service provider, right?
Yes,
And the
exactly.
and the transition to a project management.
In anything, even if they want to start off as a developer, is there any difference between a product developer and a service provider developer, and any difference on the Scrum Master level, any difference on the project management level?
So from development point of view, or the developer role point of view, the only difference would be that in a product company, you would be answering to someone within the same company.
Yeah.
Whereas in a solution provider company, you would be answering to your client's representative or stakeholder.
Yeah.
The main difference which I see here is that when you have a product company, there is only one vision, one set of KPIs or success factors. Let's not say KPIs, success factors.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have a service / solution provider, there are two companies with two sets of success factors.
Yeah.
And those two sets of success factors definitely overlap, but not completely.
Mm-hmm.
That's now from the developers or testers or any other role outside Scrum / delivery, I would say that there's no significant difference, again, besides the communication. So I would say that the prerequisites are the same.
Fair enough. Yeah.
All right.
Now, do you mind if I just follow up on that?
Yeah, follow up. Sorry.
This is something on, and in that case, what about the Scrum Master? This is something that I remember. Actually, I remember Andre mentioning this in one of the previous episodes, that one of the main difficulties for Scrum Masters in Romania is because Romania has a lot of outsourcing companies. It's hard for a company to sell a Scrum Master to a client because they're not. Well, he didn't put it this way, but I guess the way that I would put it, they're not an individual contributor. They don't actually do code. They don't actually do something tangible. They kind of just coach the team as a whole. So
yeah, I think changing from only within the team, so you cannot change within the organization, which is something that Scrum Masters kind of navigate towards.
Yeah. So how does that work in a service environment?
So first of all, and I'm speaking here from own experience, this is not something that's happening only in Romania. I've seen this in Europe. I've seen this in United States. I guess it's present in any part of the world. I think one of the main let me repeat the word prerequisite.
Yeah.
For a project and an engagement to be successful with a client is for the client himself to be not necessarily proficient, but at least have a very good knowledge of what Scrum / Agile means. And just to follow up a little bit on this idea, I have seen a tendency of people, whether they're clients or even within the same company, where they read about Scrum, they read about Agile, and they just extract the positive things for them, positive things for their vision, their interest.
Yeah.
And they leave aside what might be regarded as not necessarily the negative, but the effort part. Sorry. So again, that's not applicable only for Romania. The reason again, from own experience, why it's rather difficult to sell the Scrum Master role is that the client usually has the feeling that self-managed means that everyone knows what to do, what and how to do it. And also, it's due to the fact that usually when you have a team that is working on a project and you're the client, you're kind of seeing that team as individual contributors rather than a well-oiled machine.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, it's not that transparent, the fact that the Scrum Master is an integral part of that well-oiled machine. That is on one side. On a second part, usually in service provider engagements, the Scrum Master is more than just the Scrum Master.
Yeah.
Again, that is due to the fact that the success factors for the company who hires the Scrum Master are a bit different than the success factors for the project itself from the client point of view. And the success factors of the providing company kind of get on the shoulders of the Scrum Master.
Right.
And one point I wanted to make as well, in the Agile / Scrum Master environment, let's call it, there's no such role as project manager.
Yeah.
This is something that I've been told by someone who's a lot more proficient in Agile than myself. And of course, the first time I heard it, it was difficult to hear it. but that's the truth. That's the truth. If you look into the Scrum guide, there is no mentioning of such a role, first of all. And every responsibility within a Scrum team can be mapped to the existing roles within the Scrum guide.
Mm-hmm.
But all responsibilities that are usually taken by a project manager within the Scrum are divided between multiple roles.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
No, that's fair enough. And is there in that case a difference for a Scrum Master that works in a service industry like yourself, like you yourself had to work, versus a product Scrum Master?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So basically, again, I did not work in a product company, so everything that I'm telling you is just based kind of on an assumption. And I think that the Scrum Master role, if not 100% overlapped with whatever the Scrum Guide says, definitely it's close to that in a product company. Whereas in a service solution provider, I think that percentage is lower by a mile.
Yeah, I actually agree with this. Me being the other side of.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen both faces of the coin, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's a much different game being a Scrum Master in Razvan's case, or in my case right now where I'm at. It's a much different game, different responsibilities, and I almost want to say different levels of autonomy, because it is, to some extent, you have a different level of autonomy because you are actually expected to drive change, where on the other hand, you're mostly expected to fulfill the hidden needs, if I'm perhaps not necessarily hidden, but also the more managerial stuff, the admin stuff, and the things in between that makes everything kind of function. So yeah, I'm just backing Razvan up here.
Okay, interesting. So in that case, okay, so if I can ask from either a developer, a tester, or a business analyst for a company like yours, Rizvan. What would you be looking for in an ideal candidate? Does your company hire people without experience, basically newbies as they were, or do you only take medium and kind of senior type of positions?
So the company I currently work for now has a very low number of junior developers.
Yeah.
I think most of my colleagues are either somewhere around the mid plus, and senior. So there's the larger population, let's call it. Nonetheless, I think this is kind of an exception. So this company is an exception, or perhaps the office that we have in Romania might be also an exception in the wider company itself. I think also I believe that if we leave aside a little bit, this particular example of the company that I'm working for and take, a generic company, I think the expectations from different seniorities definitely are different. And definitely there are some common points. Leaving aside technical skills, whether it's development or testing or whatever other technical role, I think there are a couple of, let's call them soft skills, that especially nowadays, I mean, in the last 12 months or so, when the IT market has seen some very weird movements. So these soft skills, I think, if they're not already mandatory, they will become mandatory. And among them, I would like to mention, first of all, it's the attitude where you have the courage to speak up when you don't know something. You have the courage to fail, and obviously take accountability. Secondly, I would say make sure that you always have something to say.
Right.
Now, when I say always, it doesn't mean that if you if you take part in 5 meetings per week, obviously if there's one meeting where you actually don't feel that you can contribute with anything, that's not an issue. But when you have 5 meetings, let's not say in the same week, but maybe throughout 2 weeks, if you have nothing to say in in none of those 5 meetings, something's wrong. Then either you shouldn't be there or you don't understand what's going on, or you don't understand what's your role, or something's not working there.
Yeah.
And okay, then, and this is very important, especially for people who are starting out within the IT industry, because I have seen this quite often, especially in younger people. Learn to leave ego aside.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite weird when someone who has 3 months of experience comes and tries to teach you about things that you've been doing for years. I'm not saying that someone cannot have bright ideas, but from having a bright idea to almost refusing to learn and actually thinking that you can teach, it's kind of far-fetched.
Yeah.
So that these would be kind of 3 things that I would say are mandatory soft skills prerequisites.
Yeah, it does sound that there's a lot of, well, agile effectively having the courage to speak up. Basically, yeah, it's effectively being transparent. It's being especially proactive in and not waiting to be given tasks. And I would say is, especially probably you mentioned the last 12 months, but since people still have to work remotely and are working remotely more and more, it's a lot easier to, well, it's a lot harder, sorry, I would say, to just kind of um, get tasks or kind of micromanage people through the screen, through the computer. So you'd have to be more proactive yourself as a developer or as a tester.
Yeah, to be honest, not necessarily the assignment of tasks or lack of them is the main issue that I have encountered, but rather what I've noticed is that when something goes either well or wrong, which is very weird, so either of them, there are people who just don't give you the status.
Right.
And that is beyond my understanding. So you're doing a good job, you're on schedule, why wouldn't you point it out? On the other hand, when you've exceeded your allotted time, let's call it, or definitely you won't be able to meet a certain deadline or milestone, you need to have the courage to raise your hand and say, look, I've tried, I've struggled, most probably I won't be able to do it. It is better to know in advance that you will need to take action and prepare for it, rather than getting to that point where you should be delivering something and you now find out that you cannot do it. Then you need to react, and reacting is always harder than taking precautionary action.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a saying here: if you do not, sorry, let me remember how it goes. It's, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But just wanted to point out there's a nice gap where the Scrum Master can come in.
Definitely.
I mean, it's one of the stances as a Scrum Master, and you can
One of the, sorry?
Stances. There was an article which I mentioned, and let's post that in the description, Vlad. Barry Overeem wrote, initially it was the 8 stances of Scrum Master, and then a couple of years later he wrote like an updated version and he reduced it to 6 stances of a Scrum Master. And it's quite a nice article, and I think it also covers the fact, well, I know for sure that it also covers the fact that you may have team members who are not so focused on always being there, always being proactive, and they don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. And it's good to have a coach there to also know that perhaps let me help this person bring out the best in them. So yeah, just a shameless plug for a Scrum Master.
No. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. I'm just wondering, perhaps we should at a later time or another time delve a little
you can even
bit
go for it
more.
now.
I think it's worth having a separate discussion, because honestly, I think that the Scrum Master role, or Scrum Master in itself, has a lot of common points with a mentor that doesn't necessarily have to be a Scrum Master. Mm-hmm. So while definitely it's the Scrum Master role to facilitate through any means, I think we need to be a little bit careful not to send the message that within a team, it is only the Scrum Master who should take this mentoring responsibility.
Definitely. And I'll actually back you up on that. I'll say that all of these stances, these are something that's interchangeable throughout the whole team. It's basically the Scrum Master that helps, perhaps even teach the team. And you mentioned facilitation, because, for example, this was a really short debate which I had with a couple of Scrum Masters just a couple of days ago, and we all kind of reached the same conclusion. Because someone pointed out to us that facilitation is only mentioned once in the Scrum Guide, and I think it was in relation to stakeholders, if I'm not mistaken, and it wasn't to facilitate Scrum events. And one of the things which I've discovered, perhaps too late in the game, is that if I stop facilitating the daily stand-up or the daily sync, the team is more open and the team is more gelled, because the way I used to walk the board, now they started walking the board that same way, and the one person who was perhaps more silent is looking at what other people are doing rather than just waiting for their turn to speak. So that way, oh, this person has been working on the same story or on the same item for like 3 or 4 days. Do you need any help? So that question is why it's best to share the facilitation stance. So yeah, I do agree that perhaps the Scrum Master can help, and then the whole idea of coaching, mentorship, teaching, I'm just naming the stances now, facilitating and all that, they get to be spread throughout the team and throughout the company eventually.
Yeah.
I think we got too deep into this, Vlad. So I'm hoping for you to be a facilitator in this call and pull us back.
All right, let's to go a little, take a few steps back there. I want to kind of follow up on kind of the soft skills that you mentioned, Razvan, that people would need them to flourish in the IT industry, especially in the service sector. Now, one thing that I've also noticed, I work with a lot of kind of new people, new developers, new testers, etc. The education system that we have, either from university or from schooling, it doesn't promote those values and those soft skills. Is a lot of task kind of pushing orientation. So for somebody that came out of schools, came out of college, university, what would you recommend in terms of furthering their education or kind of getting those skills? Would you recommend courses, certifications maybe, or how would they gain the soft skills necessary to get into the IT industry?
All right, so I can only have an opinion on the educational system from Romania, because I did not get in contact with other countries' educational system. So unfortunately, there are a couple of things which schools and universities from Romania, but let's just stick to the universities, because maybe schools are too far in the age. But universities in Romania, my feeling is that they don't prepare you for first of all, they don't prepare you to fail. They don't prepare you to take failure as a learning process, and they don't prepare you to succeed together, fail together, and actually transform a failure into a success together as a team.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether they should be doing this. So that's a question which maybe it's worth asking, but they're definitely not doing it. Now, in terms of certifications, definitely there's no certification which teaches you soft skills. I can tell you that for certain. Certifications usually refer to technical skills, and they don't even certify your ability to use those skills. They just certify the fact that you know them, that you've read about them, are able most probably to answer questions about them, and of course put them in practice in certain very clear situations. I think these generally soft skills are developed through, experience, let's call them life experience, but also through, first of all, you need to acknowledge that you need to improve something. And secondly, you need to have the courage to put yourself into the situations where to exercise, where to grow those soft skills. But the first step definitely is the mindset. So acknowledge the fact that you need to improve something and try to gain the mindset, all right, I'm going to put myself into a situation, and this is how I am going to react into that situation. I'm going to go in that meeting and I'm going to say 2 phrases. Now, if it's difficult for me to say 2 phrases live, write them down and you can read them from a piece of paper. If you're perhaps a bit anxious, if you might not find your words on the spot. So I think this brings me, without actually realizing it, it's practice. It's also practice. Prepare yourself. If something is kind of difficult for you, prepare yourself in advance and take baby steps. I mean, I can promise you that no one will ever ask another individual to take a leap of faith or a leap. Baby steps are acknowledged. Baby steps are noticed. And that's what I would suggest. I mean, in my just one point, because I think it's important. In my 13 years of experience, I've looked at myself. Definitely at the start of my career, I had a lot of gaps. In the middle of these 13 years, less gaps, but still I was having gaps. So it's a continuous work on yourself. And as soon as you acknowledge the fact that, first of all, everyone has gaps, and secondly, no one is perfect and no one has everything covered, this gives you a self-trust that you're okay and you can achieve if you set it as a goal, for instance, for you. That would be my advice for people starting out.
Those are really good points, and kudos for that, especially with the certification. It was nicely said. Still in this context, I want to keep it here and I want to drill even more into it. How important do you think is teamwork or to be a team player for someone joining in the IT industry now? Or is it something that you learn as you get kind of thrown into a Scrum team or Agile team?
You will have to learn it. I mean, you need to be a prodigy within collaborating with others in order for you to just start off as great. Because everything about your life up to that point at 20, 21, whatever your age is, when you decide to get into, let's assume, the IT career, everything up to that point did not teach you to be a team player. But it did teach you to play for yourself, to compete with everyone else around you. So you're either a prodigy within interpersonal relationships, or you are going to have to learn it.
And is it important, or can you identify this in an interview, or have you been managed to identify this during an interview, or is it something that you're just hoping that the candidate is gonna adapt to?
I mean, I honestly would not look for it if we are talking about someone who's either coming out of university or someone who has up to 1 year of experience. Unless there are red flags, I'm not explicitly looking for that team player to be well, what's the word for it? Well established.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is my personal opinion, and this is how I would look at things.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So
there is one thing that, I mean, if you look at an individual and he's like 20 years old or around that age, and he's not a team player, let's assume that he's not a team player, and you scratch him off, okay, then where's the support?
Yeah.
From us who are experienced within the field, where's the support for those who come, after us? Again, unless there are red flags, I mean, which is kind of rare.
I mean, I was also about to ask this because this is something that we also go for. If there's any, what you would identify as red flags to a candidate, and also if you were a candidate, what would you consider red flag when applying for a company? Consider yourself a junior. So two sides to the question.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's take the first question. What I would consider a red flag in a candidate. I think a lack of interest. That attitude where, I'm here just for the sake of being here, but I'm not really interested in being here. Too much confidence. Too much confidence in a person who just starts off might become toxic, to be honest. So even if you believe in yourself, try not to show it to an extent where it becomes, it becomes kind of weird. I mean, definitely show confidence, show self-awareness, but not to the extent where I'm gonna.
It's a show off, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I was looking for that word, to show off.
Yeah.
I think this would be the red flags that I would be looking at.
Applying for a company, what would you recommend the candidates to look out for? What would you consider as a red flag? Let's say you would start off now and you would be a...
So I would rather say what they should be looking for.
Okay.
And missing those things should be the red flags. So if you're starting off, I think, or, starting off, let's say that when I say starting off, you have zero experience within the IT industry, or you have less than 1 year of experience. So between 0 and 1 year. So I think it's very important for the company to be able to tell you exactly how they are going to map out your career growth. And that should include what are the kind of trainings that they are going to provide to you, and who's the person, not by name, but by role maybe, but a good indication of who the person who's going to take care of your career growth will be. And also, and this is something that I think one can find in best practices for interviews, I think it would be a good idea to ask for a specific example of someone else's roadmap who's already hired in that company, just to get an idea.
Right.
That's one. I think that this is the most important, because when you start off, the most important thing for you is to have the necessary support from the company to grow? Because that tells you not just one, but a couple of things. First of all, that there is a plan mapped out for you. Secondly, that the company is actually intending to invest in you and in your growth. And thirdly, it tells you that you are going to also learn how to grow others. And learning how to grow others will in turn teach you how to grow yourself and what perhaps to ask from the person who is helping you grow. That's my view on it.
Thank you. And this also doubles down on a statement that I also mentioned earlier, and I fully go by it, that an interview should be two-sided. So make sure you ask those questions. Make sure you find out about the company where you're going to work, perhaps. Make sure you find these things out before you step foot through that door officially. So I encourage people to do that.
Okay, yeah, you're right, with one point here. Most companies are going to have what you mentioned as a dialogue in the interview. What you need to be very careful about is for that dialogue to be relevant, for the answers that you're giving but also receiving to be relevant, to be on point. So it's not enough to have the dialogue. Make sure that it's a relevant dialogue that makes sense, that actually answers your questions. If we put ourselves in the candidate's place.
Yeah. This is a general answer. This obviously depends from role to role. And I think as you progress in experience, it's also good, in my opinion, to ask to also have in the interview room or even online, whatever it may be, to have someone from that team where you're supposed to work. I do that. I bring people in.
Okay.
When I interview, for example, for whichever role, I try to bring people in from that specific team so that they can get to know the person, they can get to know each other, and it helps both parties, I found.
Yeah, with one point here, don't take this as a prerequisite.
No,
There are
definitely
situations
not.
in which the team is not yet set up, but nonetheless, the company does know that they are going to need that role. So just the fact that there's no one from the team in the interview should not be a red flag in itself. But there should be someone who's in that technical area,
Yeah.
and who works in a similar team, maybe just for them to be able to give you specific answers to basically your questions.
Yeah. All right. Vlad, do you have any further questions?
No, that kind of covers it, as at least the basics.
Yeah. So there's a lot of points that perhaps we will want to dive a lot deeper into in future episodes. But for this one, Razvan, thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you for having me.
and this was it. Thank
Yeah.
you for watching another episode of Ways of Agile.